Today is October 3rd, Sunday, Bhadrapad Krishna Dwadashi. The sun is going south, Dakshinayan. The Rutu is Varsha Rutu. In our community, it's fall. From the auspiciousness point of view, it's a very good day. The year is Plavanama Samvatsara. We have discussed so far about two saints from Maharashtra. But remember, I mentioned about 40 Santa, but from the Varkery group, there are about 21 of them. Half of them are from Brahmins group, but half of them are not Brahmins. And what is interesting for all of us to remember, of the 21 that we recognize as Varkery Santa, 4 of them are ladies, which is important to remember, which is a unique part about any sainthood, which is formally recognized in the community. We have talked so far about Santa Jnaneshwar. We talked about Santa Eknath. I thought today I'll discuss about Sant Tukaram, who was a Marathi poet of the 17th century and popularly known as Tuka, Tukoba, Tukora Raya. And as mentioned to you, he was part of Varkery Sampradaya. He's best known for his devotional poetry called Abhanga and his community-oriented worship with spiritual songs known as Kirtan, Abhanga and Kirtan. Of course, his poetry is devoted, dedicated to God Vitthoba, incarnation of Vishnu. Now, he would compose and sing Abhanga, and I like Sanskrit, so I'll have to break it down. Abhanga. Means absence or no, and Bhanga means ending and interrupting, breaking. That means, in other words, Abhanga is a flawless, continuous process, in this case, referring to this poem that he was creating. And by contrast, the devotional songs known as bhajans focus toward the inward journey. So when you sing the bhajan, your eyes are closed frequently and looking inwards, whereas Abhangas, you're expressing loudly and you're playing with the cymbals, zanza and mridanga. So Abhangas, to define, are more exuberant expressions of the devotee's love for the God Vitthoba as a gathered community. And of course, really, as I discussed Jnaneshwar last time, it is a form of OV. And as a matter of fact, my wife has gone as a Varkari. We have just gone by car subsequently. When they go for Varkeries to Pandharpur, that's exactly what they are dancing and singing when they're going. For example, if I were to give an example, forgive my voice, that's terrible as usual. Sundarate dhyana ube vitevari, kara katevari theuni. I just can imagine Vitthoba of Pandharpur standing with the hands on the hips, and the devotee is shouting loudly, but in his heart, he is seeing nothing but Vitthoba. Now, if we talk about his life story, he was born in the year 1608 in Dehu, which is near Pune. Naina knows it well, the present state of Maharashtra. His last name was Tukaram Ambile. His parents' name was Baloba and Kanakai, belonging to Kulbistas, the Shudra Varna. Remember, caste is different than Varna. The family owned a retailing and money lending business, Saukari, as well as always also engaged in agriculture and trade. Unfortunately for Tukaram, his parents died when he was not even a teenager. And his elder brother, after the parents' death, instead of taking the lead, he went to Kashi, never to come back. So it was left to Tukoba to run the business, which he ran even at a young age, managed all the responsibilities extremely well despite his age. And because of that, he was well respected by the community. Unfortunately, in the year 1630, that means he was 22 years old, the entire community had a terrible drought and didn't last only for one season, but lasted for more than 3 years. So when there's a famine, nothing is going in the fields, They were starving. The business suffered extensively. As I mentioned to you, he was also Saukar, so he had lent the money. But during that time, the people stopped paying him. So he, instead of having money in his hand, was starving himself. And as a result of that, his wife, Rakmabai, and he had a son by that time, Santu, both of them died of extreme starvation. Poor guy. Their deaths and widespread poverty all around in the community, he became even more downcast and contemplative because he lost the parents earlier and brother had left. But he would still regularly read the religious books that are available at home, like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagwan. And later on, as he grew up, he read Jnaneshwari, Amrita Anubhava, and Bhagavad written by Sant Ekanath. So those were the major influences on him as far as he was growing was concerned. And it's interesting, he also had read some of the verses written by Sant Kabir from North. As was the custom in those days, because he had no wife, he remarried, and his second wife's name was Aulai Jijabai. Her father was a big businessman in the Pune area. And she was very capable and hardworking, and she was dedicated to her husband and the entire family. Tukaram still maintained his retail shop, managed with total honesty, and maintained a very small farm. But his honesty was beyond the normal self, because despite his relative poverty in that business and whatever it is, if the people were poor and came to his shop, like my grandfather did as a doctor, would give them the things from the shop without charging them. So that's not a way to survive himself. So he was purposefully wanted to be spiritually enlightened and spend time in devotional worship and singing and prayers, whereas his wife wanted him instead to earn more money in the business and do not waste any time on these kind of prayers and meditations. So kind of a interesting combination between husband and wife. One day, he dreamt that Lord Panduranga, accompanied by Namdev, appeared in his dream, blessed him by placing the hand on his forehead, and suggested that he should write and follow the tradition of Namdev by writing the Abhangas, write a poetry and sing. He was so happy to get the blessing from Panduranga and seeing the appearance of Namdev along with him. He opened his eyes only to find there was nobody else. But he did feel a tremendous capacity within himself to compose the Abhangas. And from there onwards, he started singing the Abhangas of his own, which were not written in the past, but just came from his heart. And he writes about that particular episode of God coming to his dreams. As a matter of fact, I will show you here, I don't know if you can see it or not. This is the Varkery, if you can see. They're typically dressed in the orange dress, zanza in his hand, and stick in his hand. And that's how they're walking around the Pandar. It goes like this. Namadeve kele swapnamai जागे सवय पांडुरंगे येऊन या सांगितले काम करावे कवित्व वावगे निमित्त बोलू नको सांगिले काम करावे कवित्व वावगे निमित्त बोलू नको नामदेवा पायी तुझ्या स्वप्नी भेटी प्रसाद हा पोटी राहिलासे सत्य असत्याचे मनत गेले ग्वाही मानये नाही बहुमोता या बरी आली कवित्वाची स्फूर्ती पाय धरिले चित्ती विठोबाचे. So that's how the thing came to him at that particular time. From that time onwards, the wisdom of Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita started being expressed by him in simple language for any individual to grasp and understand. His amazing poetry was indeed overflowing with spiritual wisdom through his sweet, melodious devotional Abhangas. Typically, start was Tukamane. Tukamane, saintliness must be achieved in this human life. This human life is a real bargain. If you don't give your life to possess it, friends, you have wasted your human life. Saintliness cannot be purchased in the shops, nor can be found by wandering all around in the deserts or the forests. Tukamane, the Vedas tell us to seek the shelter of God and repeat his name with all thy heart. God's name on one's lip is itself a salvation. Disregarding the name is perdition or eternal damnation. Does not matter what book you read, what scripture you read, all teach the same. Tukamane, merit consists in doing good to others. Sin is doing harm to others. There is no other pair that can be compared like this. Tukamane, truth is the only freedom. Untruth is nothing but bondage. Companionship of the good is the only heaven. Indifference to that good companionship is really the hell. It is thus clear what is good and what is injurious, that the people choose what they will. With his teaching in simple terms and willingness to help others, he became very popular and well known. There was naturally a backlash from the Hippocratic Brahmin community, since somebody other than the Brahmin Varna was teaching these true words of wisdom, and that too in a local Prakrit language like Marathi, which is totally unacceptable, these stupid Brahmins. Tukaram, in due modesty, said, however, that the Lord Panduranga was making him sing these Abhangas, and nothing in these Abhangas was to his own credit. He said, Kayamya pamare bolavi uttara, paritya vishwambare bolivili. He did not go in search of the Guru. However, one night, Mahaprabhu Chaitanya came to Tukaram's dream and said, I am your Guru, and I'll give you a mantra to sing for the spiritual enlightenment. And that mantra that he received from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Ram Krishna Hari, Ram Krishna Hari. Tukaram felt really happy from that day onwards, remaining singing that mantra all the time, day and night. But he was really excited too that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself appeared and accepted him most importantly. As I mentioned earlier, the Brahmin committee was angry, upset, and kind of jealous because he was talking wisdom, but he was talking in Marathi and he was not entitled because he was not a Brahmin. Only person who can talk is a Brahmin. Only person who can teach has to speak in Sanskrit, Grivan Bhasha, the only appropriate language, these Hippocratic Brahmins said. Since Tukaram is Shudra Varna, and he's talking about Vedic scriptures in native language, he deserves to be punished. Tukaram said, such heartfelt prayers to utmost devotion is to God is the only method. These prayers and devotion to God is the only method for enlightenment and become one with the God Almighty. That's the only reason I share this basic information for all the individuals in the language that everybody can understand. He was not trying to usurp the authority of Brahmins. Forgive me. So Brahmin committee appointed a Rameshwar Shastri as a judge to make the decision. He was well-read Brahmin, well-read Pandit, but he sadly lacked the proper perception of the true meaning of scriptures. For example, if you remember, he should have realized what Sri Krishna said in the 5th chapter and the 18th verse. He remember, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shunischaiva Shvapakecha Panditaha Samadarshina. Now it's clearly mentioned that all these entities, that means a Brahmin who has wisdom, but remember, the Brahman has a wisdom along with humility, Vinaya Sampanne. Gavi, basically that is female cow, Hastini, that elephant, even God, Shuni, and Shvapaki, that means outcast. Doesn't matter who the person is, Pandita, real Pandit, not this Rameshwar Pandit, Pandita, Samadarshana, they can look at it with equal eyes, equal recognition, equal respect. What this Shastri, without spending too much time, he said, we have to follow rules and regulations. So only decision that I can give is Tukaram's Abhangs written by Shudra had to be deposited in the river, Indrayani river, and drowned. So what they did was took his Abhangas, put in the basket, or folded up in the cloth, attach a big piece of stone, big stone, and put it deposited in the Indrayani river. Tukaram was in great agony because of that decision. He stayed on the banks of the river, kept singing loudly, Vitthala, Panduranga, and he was joined by the entire community. And he continues daily kirtans right on the banks, right there. He stopped eating or drinking, despite pleadings from the devotees, also his wife Ablai Jijabai. After a little while, she joined him in fasting as well. The air became very tense with apprehension. Tukaram's breath started slowing down. As yet, he continued sweet kirtan in Lord's name all the time. Now, just imagine in front of you, exactly on the 13th day after the Abhangas were drowned, that the miracle happened. Before the astonished gaze of all and the utter joy of Tukaram, the missing Abhangas surfaced on the water and glided gently to the shore. When the devotees rushed down to retrieve those cherished manuscripts, Tukaram had the blissful vision of Balakrishna. Balakrishna is Lord standing as a young man by his side, comforting him, patting him on the back. Tukaram shed the tears of gratitude for the Lord Vitthoba Panduranga. And not surprisingly, 7 more Abhangas came out of his mouth at that time. I won't say they all, but I'll translate it for you. He said, I'm sorry I have placed you in such a difficult situation. You, Lord, more loving and caring even than my mother. You're cool, gentle, comforting like the moonlight. You're an overflowing ocean of love and compassion for all your devotees. And when he said that, a cry of joy rose from the gods. And then Tukaram was then carried home to be feasted and worshipped by the whole town of Dehu. Of course, Brahmins were not happy by that time. But what this judge, Rameshwar Shastri, had done as soon as he gave the decision 13 days earlier, he was a devotee of Nagnath near Pune again, immediately headed to Pune from Dehu. During his journey, what he did was, it was a half hot afternoon, he was feeling sweaty and hot. So he saw a well on the way, did not ask the permission of the owner, who happened to be a Muslim fakir, holy, respected guy, took a bath, and of course, fakir got angry. Nobody can use anybody's well without permission. And fakir gave him the curse. And when you get a curse from an enlightened individual, he started feeling an intense burning sensation for his body. He didn't know what to do, so instead of heading towards Pune, from Dehu to Pune, he decided to go and take relief, to go to Alandi and visit the Samadhi of Jnaneshwar. As he went to Alandi, he had divine vision doing prayers there, which instructed him to seek forgiveness and request help from that Panduranga, amazing devotee, Tukaram, whose Abhangas he was told in that vision that has resurfaced in Indrayani earlier. Oh my God, he was full of remorse, immediately wrote a letter, and when he wrote those Abhangas himself and sent it to Tukaram, that later, his burning sensation stopped. And what Tukaram did was, he sent back 5 Abhangas for him. I'll translate it first and then sing them, try to sing them. He said, when your heart is pure, the enemies turn into dear friends. Tigers do not kill you, nor do the poisonous snakes. Poisons turn into nectar, calamities turn up pleasant experiences, and the burning fires become comforting. God is always loving and caring. I experienced it many times. When the mind is pure, fire does not burn. Wild beasts of prate harm no one, just as the man of peace is with the universe. All this happens when one realizes the same infinite being abides in all creatures. Chitta Shuddha Jari Shatru Mitra Hoti, Vyagrahi na khati sarpataya, Vishate Amruta Agatate Hota, Akartavya Nita Hoya Tyasi. Dukkate Deil te Sarva Sukha होतील शीतळ अग्निज्वाळा आवडेल जीवा जीवाचे परी सकला अंतरी एक भाव तुका म्हणे कृपा करी नारायणे जाणीते नाही येणे अनुभवाने. Rameshwar Shastri was moved and he also wrote back, who's to say upper or lower caste when someone is so dear to Lord Narayana? Tukaram is enlightened as a Brahmajnana and is full of utmost devotion and renunciation. He said, उच्च नीच वर्णन म्हणावा कोणी जे का नारायणी प्रिय झाले ब्रह्मानंद तुके तुळे आला तुका तो हा विश्वसखा किडे जने. As soon as he shared that information to the fakir, that his burning sensation has stopped from the blessings of Tukaram and his Abhangas have resurfaced on the water, the Muslim fakir was amazed to hear that and wanted to meet this very Tukaram in person. But how do you find exactly the house or the person he would find? He happened to have a magic pot with him, which only filled to the brim when he had arrived at the place of an enlightened individual. So he stopped at many houses, but would not fill. Finally, he arrived at Tukaram's place, and his daughter came out and put certain amount of food inside there. And suddenly that bowl filled to the brim. She said, "Are you Tukaram?" He said, "Don't be silly. That's my father." And Tukaram heard that from inside. He came out and welcomed that fakir inside like he would welcome his own brother. That fakir stayed with him for 2 days, listening to his kirtans and his teachings, and found tremendous peace and comfort in his heart. Similarly, he also welcomed a Brahmin later on who came from Bede. He had gone to Jnaneshwar Samadhi, and he could not understand the Vedas that he had written. He was reading many times. You need a guru to teach you what it really means, because you can read the book saying Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, that's fine. But you need somebody, a guru who is enlightened, to unfold the truth in front of you. He doesn't give you the knowledge. What he does is uses his technology, his methodology, to open up your mind to the truth, like we were discussing with Professor Rambachan Anandram talking about Kena Upanishad. See, how you hear, how you see, all those things you learn by opening your inner eye, and that's the job of a teacher. So he went to see Tukaram, because what he was told was, Jayachiye, so Jayachiye Dwari Sonyacha Pimpal, Angi Aise Bala Reda Bole. That's what Tukaram said when he arrived at his place. So how can he ask you to come and see me? But what Dhaneshwar was saying is you have to go and see who is a living guru. Because, for example, you have to have a person who is alive, because Sadashiva Samarambhat, Shankaracharya Madhyama, Asmat Acharya Paryantam, Vande Guru Paramparam. So you cannot have a guru starting Sadashiva unless he is alive, like Sri Krishna taught it to Arjuna. It's a different story. Not a Shankaracharya. But you have to go through the teacher's traditional teacher, who himself was taught by enlightened teacher to learn. So that's why he had to come to Tukaram. And every person who is enlightened and recognizes the people around always tend to are envious. For example, in Duhu, there was a mutt run by Mumbaji Gosavi. Gosavi is a term for being Barji too. He was jealous of Tukaram because number of devotees going to his kirtans were increasing dramatically, whereas the number coming to his mutt was going down. Like you can see, our temple attendance keeps on increasing, but of course, many other places may not go. But the point is, you have to go where you find the peace, quiet, and inspiration. So what he had done was, his mutt was next to Tukaram's house, but he had kept immaculate garden, a locked compound, doors were closed. But one day what happened, he forgot to close the door of his property. What happened was, there's a buffalo, big buffalo gifted by Jizabai's mother, Jizabai's father, to Tukaram. She went inside because the gate was open and started eating the things in the garden. This Gosai Mambaji got mad, and what he did was, instead of getting the buffalo out and closing the door, he got a stick made up of thorns, babli se kate, and beat up that poor buffalo to such an extent that buffalo started bleeding extensively and was not even able to move. Finally, she moved and got back. And he also did invite Tukaram in, showed him what the buffalo had done, kept on cursing him. And he was getting madder with Tukaram, not simply because the buffalo did it, but because he was not saying a word. The only thing he said was, I'm very sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Then what he did was, he purposely put a thorny fence on the path behind Tukaram's house and his house, which went to the Indrayani river, where devotees walk by, Tukaram will walk by to perform the kirtans and bhajans. In the evening, when Tukaram was headed to that side, he found that thorny fence. He didn't get upset. He just pulled some of the sticks which were holding them up, opened a path for himself and the devotees, and went to the river to do the bhajans and kirtans. And seeing Tukaram do that, Mambaji got mad. He didn't say anything more except brought that thorny stick once again and started being Tukaram, who started bleeding. He didn't say a word, accepted the beatings. And after he stopped, he went to the bhajan place and continued his kirtans and bhajans. Devotees were able to walk because he had opened the gate, opened that particular path as well. And he continued. Only complaint he did was did prayers to Vitthoba Panduranga about the pain that he was suffering. His wife heard about this story, came running down to the Kirtan area, removed the thorns from Tukaram's body, cleaned up the wounds, but Tukaram was still singing during that particular time. After a little while, he stopped at Bombaji's place on the return back from Kirtans. When he was feeling a little better, his feet were still beating, and asked for his forgiveness one more time for removing the obstruction on his usual path. And why don't you come and join us for the Kirtans? The man felt so ashamed at that particular time and became repentant that he finally fell to Tukaram's feet and begged him to forgive him. Now, gradually, Tukaram's fame as a true saint became widespread. And a young Shivaji, who had won the Torna fort, Torna Killa, at the age of 14, wanted to meet him and see him in action before making him his guru. One night, Tukaram was very busy with his devotees at home when the messengers from Shivaji came to inquire if Tukaram lived there. His wife, taking those messengers to be yet another batch of unruly devotees, brusquely told them to go away, get lost. But said one of the messengers, we come from His Highness the King Shivaji with gifts for you and the saint. Her attitude changed so fast that before anyone could bat an eyelid, she was all over them with sweet words and apologies. Forgive me, she said, I took you for those bad people who come and beat the tar at all hours of the day and night. Pray, come inside. What have you brought for us from the king? We hope you'll like what the great king has sent you. There's a couple of saris, especially embroidered in gold and silk, with extra design from Paitanishi sari. Is a gem-studded cap for the little boy, and jari embroidered shawl for your husband. In addition, there are other ornaments to fit and grace the neck of a queen. How do you like this golden necklace with pearls and rubies that Shivaji has sent? She accepted all those ornaments, those saris, and was very, very pleased. So were the children. She thought how generous was the king and how high he ranked, a humble husband who's always immersed in prayers and songs. She spoke to her husband, aha, just look at all the beautiful things our Shivaji Raya has sent us. Tuka's eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at his wife and children prancing around with costly clothes wrapped around their shoulders and the gems they wore. She proudly uncovered her neck as well to impress Tukaram. Tukaram was silent. That silence discomforted her a little, and she asked with a tinge of anxiety, why don't you speak something? Finally, Tukaram said, speak? You want me to speak of what? About these trinkets you are not ashamed to wear and display? Like a foolish doll sottering around with that vile metal? The germ of envy, jealousy, and all the world's pitfalls? I, who has given up all worldly possessions, should admire the way you parade with our children, exhibiting what causes a saint's downfall? Do you think I value gold more than a clump of clay? Take off those unnecessary articles. None of them should enter our house. This is the house for the Lord and not for a worldly shop. Jizai, crestfallen, dared not in front of king's emissaries remonstrate in the usual manner against her husband's saintly advice, and one by one, slowly and reluctantly, discarded all the ornaments, including their brilliant necklace, the silks, and the bangles. While Tuka watched, and not until the last of the gifts was shed did he smile and thank the Lord. Then, turning to messengers, he begged their forgiveness for having refused the costly gifts of the generous king. He offered them hospitality and chanted softly, Panduranga Panduranga. You see, he explained to them, I'm a poor man and intend to remain so. If I were to accept his riches, I would surely lose my devotion to God. Everything, including one's body, must be sacrificed in the quest of realization. Now, Vitthala is all the riches I hanker after. My joy is at his hallowed feet, and I need nothing more. There's a man who was closely watching these happenings, concealed behind the pillar, was none other than young King Shivaji himself. At that time, he came forward and humbly touched Tukaram's feet. Tukaram composed a few verses, teaching some things, when Shivaji requested him to become a guru. He suggested that Sant Ramdas, who lived on the banks of Krishna River near Satara, would be better suited to become his guru. As yet, Shivaji enjoyed Tukaram's bhajans and kirtans, and I can't stop telling stories, so here goes one more story. Hope you're not getting bored. One day, Shivaji was enjoying Tuka's kirtans in the temple, where they all sang in ecstasy. And that particular news reached the soldiers of the Muslim Sardar, Subedar, who suddenly surrounded place. There was no route to escape for that young, but the great king. His soldiers told what is happening here. He touched the feet of Tukaram and told him about his predicament. Tears came to Tuka's eyes. Oh Lord, I cannot bear to see others suffer. Whosoever has heard that such a calamity should overcome people engaged in singing your name. Oh, we have been put to shame. Do not fear death. We are not, but let not these devotees be plunged into grief. Are you not present where that praise is sung? My Lord, show thyself to us. Following that, the intensity of Kirtan redoubled, and Tuka and his devotees totally lost in the name of Vitthala Panduranga. Remember, the temple is completely surrounded by the Muslim soldiers. Soon, Vitthala Panduranga, in Shivaji's attire, started escaping through the temple's door. The enemy was excited and was drooling since they started daydreaming that the praise and the gifts that Shivaji's arrest is going to bring for them. Shivaji quote, traveled at a great speed for quite a distance, and soldiers were trying to remain in hot pursuit. Were left to wonder at the end when suddenly Shivaji's horse completely disappeared in the forest. That confusion allowed Shivaji ample time, the real Shivaji, to make a safe and quiet getaway and remain safe to continue his quest of maintaining Hinduism and growing it further. Finally, I can go on for stories, I won't bore you. Tukaram finally reached his spiritual realization after having gone through all the challenges in his life, some of which we had a chance to touch on so far. I'll translate one Abhanga from Tukaram Gatha. Tukaram says in that Abhanga 2482, when salt is dissolved in water, what is that remains distinct? I thus become one in joy with thee, Vitthoba. I have lost myself in thee. When fire and camphor are brought together, is there any black remnant left? Tuka says, thou and I are only one light. Finally, as the days passed by and his bhajans and kirtans continued, in the month of Falgun 1650, he had the vision of Lord Vitthoba welcoming him back with him for good. He shared that vision with his devotees and continued with increasing vigor his daily bhajans. He was excited even more because he was going to be with Vitthoba full time. He kept on singing, my dear Vitthoba, please do me a favor and make me forget about my body and take me with you so I disappear from all those devotees here. I'm so happy that I had this life. To translate his original word, Ata deva aisa kari upakara, dehacha visara pado mala, taricha ha jiva pavolo he sukha, aise keshi raja kado ale, ata diso naye na jana, aise kara narayana. So he was just waiting for him to come along. Then he sang some more Abhanga, was very happy with his life, and he said, by placing the corn kernels in fire, we turn them into popcorn and never can be corn again. I have no more cycles of birth and death. With your grace, there is no longer shape or form. This human body has turned into real God. How can sugar turn back into sugar cane? And hence, I do not have to keep on visiting my mother's womb. I have seen my death with my own eyes, and that transformation was truly amazing. For example, he said, Bija bhajuni keli lahi, amma janma marana nahi. आकाराशी कैसा काठाव देह प्रत्यक्ष झाला देव साखरेचा नवे ऊस आम्हा कैसा गर्भवास आपुले मरण पाहिले म्या डोळा तो झाला सोहळा अनुपम्य. So that's how he describes the whole thing. He started singing, here comes the Vitthoba then. He was in delirium. I can see all those wonderful things in his hand, Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. I can see his yellow dress and dazzling necklaces. I'm with you in Vaikuntha. Me and mine are no more. God and I live together, never to be parted again. And suddenly, at that moment, Tukaram disappeared. Rameshwar Shastri describes, he's the one who asked for forgiveness after giving the judgment earlier. He wrote Abhangas too. He saw a unique flying entity come and took away Sant Tukaram. That's exactly his portrait in the folktale. Rameshwar Bhatt and Tuka's younger brother Kanova and other devotees remained 3 days on the river ghats, singing kirtans, fasting, praying to Tuka to give them a token of his presence wherever he was. Finally, on the 3rd day, Tuka's symbols, Zanda, and his asana, the seat, fell down from the skies And the devotees sang in joy as the sound of Vitthala Panduranga, Vitthala Ramakrishna Hari continued to ring for days as it goes on every year from day onwards in celebration of this particular event. The scholars get often confused as to whether he was in reality closer to Shankaracharya as Advaiti or Dvaiti like Madhavacharya. Because Tukaram would say when monism is expounded with faith and love, the expounder as well as disciple and listeners are troubled and afflicted. One who calls himself a Brahman and goes about his daily life without following those vows should not be spoken as a Brahmin at all. He is a buffoon. So he was criticizing. The shameless is the one who speaks hearsay opposition to the Vedas. It should be object of scorn among holy men. Nonetheless, one can surmise that he was much closer to the view of Shankaracharya, but as described in Gita, he preferred the path of Bhakti Marga to his enlightenment. But as a matter of fact, Shankaracharya also says that Bhakti Marga also is very important, and that's the way he suggested using Panchayatan, if you remember. Shankaracharya, with the conflicting entities in the community at this 8th century, with Vaishnavas and Shaivites and Shaktas, what he suggested that one should pray to 5 different entities, and hopefully everybody has a place of worship in their home, where at least 5 of these entities are there in whatever form. One is Vishnu, one is Shiva, one is Devi, one is Ganesha, and the 5th one is Surya, the sun god. That's in the sky, that's Gayatri Mantra. So that's a Panchayatan, the Shankaracharya. So he also emphasized the value of prayers. So he was closer to Shankaracharya. And as Sri Krishna has mentioned, you can follow through the process of samsari or sannyasi. He preferred the path of samsari and a bhakti marg. And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned to you, he never cared about the caste system. He always said, even the Vedas and Shastras say, in the service of God, castes do not matter. A Brahmin who does not care for the name of God is no Brahmin. An outcast who loves the name of God is indeed a Brahmin. After all the different castes are ultimately sprung the same Brahman God. So we're all exactly the same. I'll stop at this particular stage. I'd like to hear the comments and questions from. That's okay.
I was just going to say that I'm glad you pointed out that Brahman is what Brahman does or thinks or whatever. Exactly. Brahman is not something that just comes from birth. No. You know, that it does not bestow upon you certain privileges or something. It is really, and what I am most impressed is the Varkeries. You know, they go with such devotion. I've watched them, you know, to a small extent. They'll walk miles barefoot on grit and stone and whatnot. That to me is bhakti. So, you know, when you talked about bhakti, so I just wanted to mention.
Exactly. They have to be Brahmanishta. So basically, either you have to be mumukshu trying to achieve towards the stage of Brahmatva. So that's why you seek out a teacher who's enlightened, Kshotriya and Brahmanishta. So that is very essential. So Brahmanishta is one who's grounded in Brahman, who's experienced in experience what Brahman is inside within him and lives that particular life. So that you have to be, then only you are Brahmin, otherwise you are not. You are a fake individual who poses as Brahmin. Okay? So that is the real Brahmin. So it doesn't matter what particular caste you're born in. The caste is different than Varna. Caste is basically the profession that you have, casta. The Portuguese people, when they came, casta is Varna. Varna, that means Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are Varnas. And these are all jatis. So he's a Kulbi class jat was Tukaram's. So that doesn't mean, but what you do in your life places you in a particular Varna. So that when you go to the doctors, your doctor's meeting, but then you have basically is Dr. Varna. Basically, we meet for doctors' conferences. We have to go through certain training and reach that particular level. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Madhavi, comment, yes?
हा ठीक, एकदम छान आवडलं आजचं पण हे. आणि जस्ट कोणाला आता तुमच्या ह्याच्यात मराठी वाचता येत असेल तर दिस इज द बिगर व्हर्जन ऑफ तुकाराम गाथा.
Okay.
आणि actually I came across this book which is actually much smaller. If anybody can read, the Tukaram Abhangas are very nicely explained in this. Yeah. So
exactly. You know what, Madhavi, we live in America, so everything is instant coffee, instant tea. They want to know everything. No, I think you have to really read it, and not just reading it, reading and participating, practicing it. So that's why you go to, what happens is that you go to that stage through step by step.
Right. No, but what the reason I showed is whoever reads, it's like a 1-page reading per night. Just a 1 page has one abhanga, and it's really, I don't know how purifying you can say, bedtime reading. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's why we talk when our discussions were going on for a long time in the temple. We frequently, most of the people come to the temple when they are in pain, artha. Then many times they come there to do Satyanarayana Puja to get certain reward. That means they're basically bargaining. But the real thing is you have to be mumukshu. That means want to know what the ultimate thing is. So there are 4 different people. Artha, those who are bargainers, that's called artharthi. Third is mumukshu. And finally is the one who are enlightened. So these are the 4 different stages. But the key is you have to at least come to the temple whenever you need it, you feel it, then come to realize that it's not just enough to get a good job, good wife, good children, but there has to be something more than that. But that comes by, as we had discussed, Bhaja Govindam last year, was satsangatve nitsangatvam, nitsangatve nischalatatvam. Between goes to nimohatvam. And then Nischalatatve, Jivan Mukti, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Basically, you have to start in the company of good. And if you remember, when I was discussing what Tukaram was saying, also said, you have to have satsanga is very important, good company. But you have a choice what you want to do. It's up to you.
And one more abhanga that came to mind from Tukaram when you were talking was, it's very pertinent to what you just commented. Khevile anante taisechi rahave. Chitte aso dyave samadhana.
Samadhana, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We sang that. One of our friends put a video together, so we did sing that last year. So when everything was COVID going on, nobody was going out of the house, so that's why we were singing from Washington DC. Good, exactly. Good thing you mentioned that. The only thing is, my problem is I don't have a good voice to sing like you guys do.